Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Nerd News Podcast. My name is Tyler Waltz, and today I'll be flying solo as I discuss Godzilla-1 and the Game Awards of 2023.
Welcome to the Nerd News Podcast, starring Tyler Waltz.
The first thing that I would like to discuss is Godzilla-1. This is a movie that I've been anticipating for quite some time, ever since it was first announced, and I think it delivers on every front. The place that I want to start, though, is actually with what most people think is the worst part of any Godzilla movie, and that is the human plot. However, the reason that I want to start there is because I think this movie did it better than almost any Godzilla movie I've seen since the original Godzilla. This movie takes place right at the end of World War II and a few years after. The plot follows a kamikaze pilot who backs out of his final mission and lands on a small island to wait out the rest of the war with another platoon. While on this island, they actually get attacked by Godzilla before his mutation, and this attack on the island at the beginning of the movie is one of my favorite parts for the simple fact of having a Godzilla that's about the size of a normal dinosaur adds a very good horror feel up top and sets the tone for what he is the rest of the movie. The rest of the human plot of the movie is very much dealing with one's past. Since he is a soldier, he's dealing with PTSD, he's having a hard time connecting with the people around him, and he's always living with that little bit of regret for what he could have done to stop Godzilla on that first encounter at the island. But then, after a brief time skip, we see basically a montage of nuclear tests that causes Godzilla to mutate into the giant lizard that we all know and love today. And with that, our protagonist actually takes a job as a minesweeper just off the coast post-war. And this is what leads to the scene that was in the commercials a lot where Godzilla is chasing the boat. And I have to say, this isn't the most nuclear or the craziest, most overpowered Godzilla that we've ever seen, but the way that they're able to scale his destructive ability in this scene is amazing because they essentially are saved by this battleship that they've recouped after the war, and Godzilla takes it out no problem. Now, in retrospect, with most Godzilla movies, you would say, of course. But since this is more of a first take on Godzilla or a reboot of what the original tried to do, it's masterfully done and really puts it into perspective about what it would be like to be in a situation like this. The human plot of this movie also hits on some pretty tough subjects, especially when it comes to post-war and PTSD, but essentially it's kind of a critique on the Japanese government and how it treated its people during World War II. Because even in the moments where they're plotting to take out Godzilla, most of the plot is how the government kind of failed them, and it's up to a humanitarian people's effort and the citizens to take charge and become who they need to be to take out Godzilla. And I have to say, after growing up on many Godzilla movies where they always invent the next big gun or the next big monster, and I have to say, it was very refreshing going to not just a military effort, because it is cool to see the planes and everything fighting, but at the end of the day, this was a group of people that used their knowledge to take out a creature against overwhelming odds. Another subject that I kind of want to touch on is how this is so different than what here in the US we're kind of used to with the MonsterVerse movies that we see now. And it's also had the #1 opening weekend in the US from Japan. And though I am excited for what the MonsterVerse has coming with Godzilla and Kong and their team up and the big monster fights and the battles like what I grew up as a kid where they're fighting some big new monster, I think that taking Godzilla back to his roots and making him the villain every once in a while, like Godzilla-1 or even Shin Godzilla in 2016, is always a good reminder of how he came to be and what destruction can happen. So I kind of want to end this review of Godzilla-1 with my two favorite things and my two biggest complaints of the movie. My personal favorite thing about this movie was the fact that it was able to take a human story and make it good for the first time in a very long time for a Godzilla movie. I know the #1 complaint with most Godzilla movies is that nobody cares about the people. But even if you take Godzilla out of this movie, it's still a very good humanitarian story of people coming together to defeat the odds. And secondly, this is by far one of the coolest heat rays or flame breath, nuclear breath, whatever you want to call it, that I've ever seen in a Godzilla movie. Normally, especially in some of the older films or the MonsterVerse, it is very epic, but it's kind of just his final attack. But you really feel the buildup in this movie. If you've seen the trailer, you see his spikes start to finally bulge out and glow blue. But the buildup takes so long in the movie that you're getting to the edge of your seat and you're just like, okay, this is going to be devastating. And the effects for a 15 million budget movie just knocks your socks off. It's absolutely amazing in every way, and you completely feel the devastation and the hopelessness that would come from an attack like this. Now, my two complaints, one of them is actually kind of a funny throwaway. It's not actually a complaint, but it's actually the first few minutes of the movie when Godzilla was just a dinosaur-sized creature was incredible. It honestly made me think that they could just make a horror movie like pre-mutated Godzilla something. Like the first 15 minutes of the movie made me want so much more of that. I couldn't get it out of my head. So I would love to see if Toho could maybe do something with that. And I don't think we got enough of that. I think they could have built up the horror on a personal level a little bit more at the beginning. The second complaint, and there's no way to talk about this without major spoilers. So just as a heads up, if you don't want spoilers, you might want to skip ahead a little bit. But my second complaint is that the girlfriend of the main character very heroically in a scene saves the protagonist. However, it's revealed at the end of the movie that she lived. It kind of took away from the moral story that they were kind of trying to tell with persevering and always moving forward and kind of like burying your demons. Just to have her come back right at the end for the credits, it kind of took away from her death, and I kind of wish that they would have either left her dead or shown him moving on in a different way that kind of showed her sacrifice. With all that being said, come back for part 2 where I go over a little bit about the Game Awards and some of the announcements that I was pretty excited for. For those of you that are tuning in now, I'm assuming that you have some kind of semblance with the Game Awards, what happened this year, and what is coming out. So with that, I'm just going to go over a brief, maybe 5 to 10 minute summary of what I thought and the things that I'm personally excited for coming up in 2024. The first thing that I want to get out of the way is the joke that Baldur's Gate 3 took everything. Although in the categories that it was in, it pretty much dominated, I do think it was well deserved when it comes to the other things that were in the categories with it, especially when it comes to Game of the Year. Because if you look at all the contenders for Game of the Year, you had Resident Evil, Alan Wake, Super Mario Wonder, Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, Spider-Man 2, and Baldur's Gate. A lot of those games were a lot of fun. I played many of those games. I think the only one that I didn't really have too much familiarity with was Alan Wake, but even taking Alan Wake into effect, every single one of these games was a sequel. And when I look at games that are sequels, I'm kind of looking for what the biggest difference was from the predecessors to today, or even how the sequel has changed the industry or done something for the bigger picture overall. And though I think Alan Wake personally was a close second for me, Baldur's Gate just had to take this easily. Like, no offense, I loved Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 was a masterpiece to me. I loved it, but it's still a remake of a game. It didn't really revolutionize anything. It was just kind of a similar engine, or if not the same engine, to Resident Evil 2 and 3's remake, just with the best game in the series. Spider-Man 2 was a sequel that I thought was very fun, but they kind of took some gadgets out and they did tell a better story. I thought Venom was great. But when it comes to revolutionizing, Baldur's Gate 3 has kind of set a standard in RPGs that a lot of gaming companies are actually worried about, because the expectations for a good game now is so much higher in those categories. And I'm not just sitting here going over all that stuff because I enjoyed Baldur's Gate 3. It's mostly just a complaint on the industry as a whole to come out with some more game-changing or revolutionary things. I know last year there was some kind of complaints that Elden Ring got it over God of War, but I think that one was deserved too. Now, with that being said, I am a huge Souls fan, so there's probably a little bit of bias there. But the change between Elden Ring and the previous Souls games was so much bigger of a difference between God of War and God of War Ragnarok. And that's the kind of thing that I look for in a game of the year. It's how has this changed the industry, if it was able to at all. I did see some people out there saying that Starfield deserved to be nominated. Maybe, but personally, I'm glad that it didn't win anything. I like the formula that Bethesda has done, especially with Fallout and Skyrim and Elder Scrolls. I love all those games. However, their games are still just very buggy messes. They're kind of always a mess at launch. The loading screens in Starfield were really bad, and I think it was just the Bethesda formula kind of updated, but it was still just the same thing. It was really hard for me to say, but I do think that Starfield kind of fell short, especially of expectations. Just to kind of wrap things up, I'm going to go over some of my more anticipated projects that I saw announcements for. The first one being the Blade game. I'm normally, especially because I'm trying to do this, up to date on the news and what's coming out, but this really surprised me. I was not expecting a Blade game. I'm not really sure how they want to try and pull off this Blade game, and Marvel here recently hasn't had a good track record, to say the least, with what they've been doing with their games. But I feel like some kind of hack and slash genre like Devil May Cry would go okay for the series. But I think what a lot of people want is something of an underground vampire. I don't want to say Vampire the Masquerade, but something a bit more noir with it, I think would go over very well. I also saw the advertisement for Overdose, which is Hideo Kojima's new game. Equally as confusing as Death Stranding. Maybe not as confusing because there's no naked Norman Reedus or random babies on the beach, but it was still a very odd trailer. I was a big fan of Death Stranding. I know that that's kind of a whiplash of a game when it comes to quality or what people think of it, but I did enjoy it a lot, and I played the hell out of it. So I'm very excited for what his future projects are, and I will absolutely be getting Overdose no matter what. The third one that I kind of want to just go over really quick is Monster Hunter Wilds. As somebody who's never played Monster Hunter before, I've always been very interested in getting into the series. It just seems like one of those games that's so daunting that it's hard to be a new player in. However, I do think I'm going to pull the trigger on Monster Hunter Wilds so I can just have some kind of experience in this game. The last game that I want to go over is probably my most anticipated, but also most feared that it's going to crash and burn, and that's Jurassic Park Survive. For those of you that don't know, Jurassic Park Survive is going to take place after the first movie, and you're essentially an engine worker that has been left behind after the events of the first movie. And this game sounds like 10-year-old Tyler's dream. I have always thought that the Jurassic Park series, especially the older ones with The Lost World or something like that, could have made an absolutely amazing survival horror game, but I don't think we've ever gotten quite that experience. There have been games that have had some creepy elements in it and have made tense situations, like the Telltale games, as buggy and weird as that one was. But I think if they can make this work, it could be one of the best Jurassic Park games we've ever seen. I want to thank you all for watching. I know that I didn't have a guest today and that this was just kind of me going over some nerdy stuff and talking about what's going on in the nerd world, but I want to know what you guys think. Do you think Baldur's Gate 3 deserved all the awards that it got? Are you equally as excited for the Jurassic Park game as me? And do you think that Godzilla needs to take more of a turn towards the traditional movies like what Toho is doing, or are you all in on the Monsterverse? Thank you all so much for watching. We have a bunch of great stuff coming up. The last thing I want to leave off on is a quick announcement. Tyson and I, we love doing this. We've got the shorts. We're doing the live shows with the Monster and the Dungeons and Dragons stuff and the podcast. But starting January 8th, we would actually like to start doing a live stream with you guys, just a once a month live stream, catch up, have some fun, talk about some nerdy things, and playing a game. So if you want to check that out, we're going to start making posts and let us know what you think. If we did play a game, what sounds good? So thank you all so much, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you for checking out Nerd News, everybody. We don't have advertising, so you are the advertising. If you like it, tell a friend, like, comment, subscribe, even leave a review on Apple. Everything that you do to support us, we truly appreciate it. And we actually just launched our Patreon, so if you'd like to support us even more, you can go check that out. All of our content is free. We have different rewards for different tiers, so check that out, and thanks again. We'll catch you next time.